The Bad Batch is back, and it's just good quality Star Wars fun. This is a great show for families to watch. It's satisfying the inner child in all of us. This is the Star Wars that we grew up loving because it's fast-paced adventure. It's not heavy on any sort of plot, although the storylines, if you watch the entirety of the seasons, like with the Clone Wars in the first season, you do get some pretty good story arcs that can last multiple episodes. But right off the bat, we have a very fast, fun-paced heist, which does ultimately end in a cliffhanger. So if you want to know about what happens in the second episode, part of the two-part premiere, you'll want to stay tuned because I'm doing each episode individually. So without further ado, we're going to dive into episode 1 of season 2 of The Bad Batch. Now, before we get going, as always, spoiler full. I don't do spoiler free. So if you don't want things spoiled, watch this later. But if you've already seen it, dive in. Let's go. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, support with the super thanks, memberships, Patreon page, all the good ways to support. In the meantime, let's just get into the show. So, right off the bat, we've got this idyllic beach scene, which I got a good chuckle out of this because it's this beach scene. It looks pristine, tropical environment, and then boom, it's ruined by three of the clones charging out of the forest, and Wrecker's got a big old box that he's carrying, and they're being chased by giant crabs. We flash to the next sequence, and we've got Omega sitting on the ramp of the ship, bored out of her skull, looking over ship details on her engineering pad, and she's hanging out with Tech. And then you hear, "Okay, we need help, we need, rescue," and Tech's like, "Wrecker woke the pod, didn't he?" And it's like, man, Wrecker's always clunking around doing something crazy to get things sparked off. But that's part of the charm of this show is that you have these clones who have their flaws, even though they have their unique deviations as they called them. But it's just good fun. So um, there's a tense moment here as they try to take off, and they've got a fish line into the ocean. And there appears to be one of the giant crabs. They're hanging onto it, and Tech can't get the ship going off, and he's trying to jerk the ship up. And Omega falls out and falls down the line, but ends up kicking butt with her bow. And then here come a bunch of more crabs, and she's like, "Uh-oh." But it's a good sequence here because we're seeing some intense acrobatics as Omega is jumping around, firing her bow, Tech lowering the line. She jumps back on, and it's basically showing her genetics at play because of who she comes from, even though she is a clone. So it's just good. It's a great way to see that this kid has a lot of raw talent because of her genetic makeup. And then as we come around the bend with the ship and we see the other guys running forward, they're like, "Why is Omega hanging from the line?" And Tech answers, "It's an unscheduled study break," which really made me chuckle because it's moments like these that make this show fun and quirky and good for the whole family because it's not meant to be super serious. It's taking fun of, it's understanding the fun and the cheesiness of what's at play here. But there's quick little moments like this that just make you chuckle. So yeah. They deliver whatever it is that they're delivering to Mr. Sid, who is helping them with their new life. Um, she's a little upset because they're late, and meanwhile, they meet this suspicious new woman who turns out to be called Fee, who's a pirate friend of Sid. And I'm sitting here, is this Wanda Sykes? I didn't actually look up to see if that's who this was, but it sounded a lot like Wanda Sykes. And I know they've done a good job of getting some pretty amazing guest stars to come on and do voice acting for cameo characters here and there. So I think that probably is, but we'll see. But apparently, their next mission is going to be to go to the Outer Rim to check out Castle Sereno, which is the former home of Count Dooku. Because apparently his war chest is up for grabs now that he's gone and out of the equation. And Sid wants to get some of this because she explains to the group, like, look, the Empire is cracking down, the Imperials are cracking down. Um, we're able to do these small jobs now, but eventually the Empire is going to be coming this way. And when they do, we're not going to be able to hide. If we could get our hands on some of the money from this war chest, it would give us enough coin to completely go off the grid and disappear for all time. Hunter sees this as too dangerous, and he's like, no thanks. And he's off studying with Omega, but the rest of the group wants to do it. And they vote against him because the loot's just too much to pass up. And there's a debate that's had, but ultimately what convinces Hunter is because when he's beginning to understand that what Sid is saying is true, he looks at Omega and he's like, okay, we got to do this for the kid if we're going to have any chance at life beyond this. But there's also a really good conversation here between Echo and Hunter about, all of these other people that need help. It's not just about her. We can't hide. Like you're not going to protect her by hiding. The only way we're going to truly be able to protect Omega is by going out there and defeating the Empire and doing something about it. And we do get this really, I think it's a telling scene here where Omega's kind of listening in and she's hunkered down with her doll. And it just kind of goes to show that despite her toughness, despite everything, despite her training, her genetics, deep down she is just a scared little girl, just a child still, who's had to grow up way too fast. And despite all of her genes and everything else, she's still only human. So it was a really, I think this was a very important scene to show that she is just a little girl after all, and still very scared despite the front that she puts on and despite all of her training and everything else. They get to the planet, and this is your traditional kind of Clone Wars Bad Batch action scene for the latter half of this episode because, obviously they want to get in and rob the chest and get out, and nothing goes as planned. Um, and I think that all of this as I'm watching the shots unfold is what makes me really appreciate what they've done with like the Clone Wars and looking at the Bad Batch now because this animation team they're firing on all cylinders and I realize that not everyone likes stylized art like what they have with the Bad Batch, what Lucasfilm Animation has done, but I like it, and I think if you just look at the shots that they're doing, these guys know what is good visual storytelling. So you've got pan shots, zooms, I mean, it's all these action sequences, explosions, and everything else as they're working on trying to rob this container. And there's also infused with little moments of comedy, like Wrecker takes a stun gun to one of these stormtroopers, and he's like, "What? I did it quietly," you know. And they're like, it's gonna come to bite us in the butt because someone's gonna miss him eventually. And Hunter's running around planting devices on ships ready for a distraction. And sure enough, right as they find the credits and the gems and everything else, the stun guard's not reporting in, and this is when things go haywire. And that's what the Bad Batch is all about. Operations like this, where their combat expertise comes into play, and it's all about action, adventure, and excitement. Here we go. Um, the group gets separated. Echo, Tech, and Omega are trapped in the container and they're getting transported up to the ships, while Hunter and Wrecker are on the planet trying to escape inside of the castle. And they end up disappearing down an elevator shaft while up on the ship. The imps realize that they're on board. They fire off all the escape pods so they can't escape. And the kid, Omega's like, hey, all these containers have reentry thrusters. Let's disappear one of the containers. So they release all the containers and they all go tumbling down to the planet. They're inside one of them, and the episode fades to black as they realize the thrusters aren't firing. So we're obviously going to be picking this up in the next episode as this cliffhanger ends with probably the thrusters are going to fire and everything else. But what's really intriguing to me is what are Hunter and Wrecker gonna find as they get down to the elevator shaft? Because it looked like the elevator they took was from like a control center or some sort of throne room or something. So we're gonna be finding out. So stay tuned because that episode will be up here in a little bit. So like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, support with a super thanks, membership down below. Don't forget the Patreon page. Links are down below. May the force be with you. Until next time.